any person that isn't willing to go to a deeper place to access their own creativity, you're doing yourself a disservice. There is not another you, and you have a unique take and spin on whatever it is that, your gift is. Welcome to the Legacy Creator Podcast, a show dedicated to giving you the tools you need to build a profitable, purposeful, and powerful business that lasts. I'm your host, Ashton Smith. I'm a 6th-generation entrepreneur who is passionate about helping you think bigger so that you can actualize your goals and build your legacy. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Legacy Creator Podcast. We have a fun guest.
Hi.
This is Jordan. A lot of you guys will know her if you follow us on social. She's a part of our team, and we're keeping the first season pretty quiet when it comes to guests because we really wanted to just set the tone for the show. So Jordan's our first guest because she's a part of the team, and she's a huge reason why we're able to do what we do at The Awakening. So I'm so excited for today. Quick intro to Jordan. Jordan graduated from Campbell University with a bachelor's in business administration in 2021. She's now the creative director at The Awakening, where she's responsible for all photography, video editing, graphic design, and creative campaigns. So she just does everything. And she's a creative to the core. In her spare time, she loves to write poetry, spend time with family, and listen to music from the 60s and the 70s.
Ooh.
So, Jordan, as we dive in, share a fun fact about yourself.
Oh God. I always, when we did that in college classes, I never knew what to say. I don't even remember what I would say for those questions, but I would, the first thing that came to my mind was when I was born, I came out of the womb twirling into this world, okay? And, it's just a weird fun fact because the doctor looked at my dad and was like, have you ever seen that before? And he was like, no. And, the doctor had never seen that before. And I just felt like I was so unique and just came spinning into this world,
Literally came spinning into the world. I just feel like that just set the tone for Jordan's life because Jordan lives her life like she is a fairy. We always joke about how we wish we could live in a musical, for a day. So I just feel like that sets the tone for who you are.
Yes.
And I feel like it's just really fitting that we're going to have our first discussion together on the podcast about creativity because Jordan literally is the creative behind the brand. I'm kind of the face and I speak and I talk and I create, I write. But Jordan is the one that takes care of all of our visuals. She helps us with campaigns, the one that we actually just put on for the launch of the podcast. And it's something that we get asked about or people will comment on quite often. They're like, where do you guys get these ideas? Or how do you do this? You always put out things that are different. And that's not to toot our horn, but we are really intentional with wanting to create things that are meaningful or different or stand out. And so today we're specifically going to talk about how to access your creative voice in a noisy world. I feel like this is relevant for a couple of reasons. I think first and foremost, we're all designed to create in one form or fashion. Someone may be a painter, someone else may have creative solutions in business. We all have creativity inside of us. And then number two, this is so relevant when it comes to building your business online. I mean, you're creating content all the time and we get questions about how are you so consistent or how do you create things that are different, that are stand out? How do you tap into that place? And that's really where we want to kind of focus our energy for this particular episode. Imagine with me for a second. It's Monday morning. You sit down at your desk with clarity, confidence, and peace of mind. You know exactly what to do in order to move your business forward in the form of impact and cash flow. This is a reality for so many inside our Awakening membership, and it's possible for you too. If you're ready to effectively structure your time, actualize your goals without the burnout, and amplify your impact and revenue, our membership can help. As a podcast insider, you can join today and get half off of your first month. Head to myawakening.co/membership and use the code LegacyInsider in all caps at checkout. Again, head to myawakening.co/membership and use the code LegacyInsider in all caps at checkout. We can't wait to serve you on the inside. Now, back to the episode. Let's kind of kickstart with actually defining, like, what is creativity?
Creativity. We were looking up definitions for this. The first definition that came up was the use of the imagination or original ideas, especially in the production of an artistic work. But I really liked some of the similar words. Innovation, inventiveness, and imagination. And like you said, you were talking about we're all like creative in our own ways. I like to think of it as like we're all, no matter if you're like artistic or not, we're all like little creators and we're all like creating things, you know? And especially on this podcast, we're talking a lot about like entrepreneurship and running businesses and everything. And one of the similar words to creativity is innovation. And I feel like that ties in so well with like the entrepreneurial like spirit, you know? And yeah, I just found that definition so wonderful because I like the use of the imagination and specifically the term like original ideas. When it comes to like creating graphics and things for the Awakening specifically, it's like that's my number one thing in the back of my mind is like, how can we be original? Because you see so much of the same stuff online. And that's just the nature of it. You know, you see things and you kind of like take that in and you might even like unintentionally kind of, you know, create things that look similar to someone else or whatnot. But that's like the number one thing I strive for because you want to like use your own creativity, your own ideas, and like let that shine out of you. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I do love like imagination, innovation, inventiveness. I think when a lot of people in our space, in the entrepreneurial space, they think about creativity, like you think about how can I be more consistent with creating graphics for our socials? And you think about it more in like a structured way. And maybe like I say that because that's kind of how I think about it, because I know like there's a lot of work and structure that has to go into like logistically getting your content out in the world. But I think there is so much room for us to kind of like challenge ourselves and call ourselves higher when it comes to creating within our businesses, whether, you know, it's a marketing campaign or it's a creative solution for a client. But I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today will be in direct support of like, marketing and how you are portrayed in the online space. How can you tap into that space of creativity in a new and powerful way? And so I think that we have a few points we want to kind of kick off with. Why don't you start off with point one?
Number one, the first thing that I would recommend is like get bored. I heard this, I don't know where I heard this, but it was like several years ago now, somewhere online, I saw someone maybe in an interview talking about boredom and how important that is in your process of creativity, because in today's world, I like to think of today as like, it's like the entertainment era. There's a lot of entertainment around us and it's the information age, you know, so there's a lot of information and things that we have access to on our phones. Like our phones are like mini computers and they're like the size of your hand. So like, it's so easy to gravitate towards it. And when you are, when you get to that place of boredom, like if you ever get to that place of boredom, which I feel like is rare in today's age, you automatically pull out your phone or like, you know, put on Netflix or put on a show on Hulu and like binge watch that. And so you don't ever leave space for true boredom. And the other day I was thinking about when we were children and, you know, when we grew up, especially, we didn't have the technology as much like in that way, in that part of our lives. And, we would like go outside and play. We would make the use of our time. If we ever reached true boredom, it was like we would just play with each other, like run outside. I know when I was younger, I really liked, you know, I always had like a diary. And so I would sometimes write in there or doodle. Like I always really liked art. And if I was bored, I would just do something with my time. But we don't really have that as much today, as easily today. And that made me think of the question, like, what did people have years ago, like hundreds of years ago, that we don't have today? So I was thinking about like the greatest works of art that were created hundreds of years ago. Like, how did they get to that place of creativity? And I would say like the number one thing, they had boredom. They had access to a level of boredom that we don't have today. And number two, they had the freedom from the technology that we have today. So they didn't even have that as an option. They didn't have the option of like, I'm going to pull out my phone and watch something. They, like I think about if they wanted entertainment, they would like go to the theater or like they would entertain themselves. People would play piano in their homes and like sing together. They would make use of that time. And speaking of boredom, I want to like quickly talk about Frankenstein. Mary Shelley's novel, Frankenstein, is one of like the most notorious, well-known works of literature, specifically Gothic literature. But I was thinking about like the story of how Frankenstein came about, and I was so fascinated. I heard this years ago, and I wanted to like make sure I had the right details for this. But so Mary Shelley, first off, she was only 18 when she first started writing that.
That's just psycho.
Which is insane. Like, it's crazy. But so at the time, there's a poet. His name was Lord Byron. If you don't know who Lord Byron was, basically he was a poet. He kind of had that like bad boy persona, and he was always avoiding scandal. So in 1816, he fled to Geneva to avoid scandal, whatever was going on at the time. And there he met up with Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, and Mary's sister, Claire Claremont. And while they were all there, basically Lord Byron got bored. Like, he was just like, what are we doing here? And he was like, why don't we see who can write the greatest ghost story? And I would say that Mary Shelley won that because, like, are you kidding? It's one of the most well-known works of literature. But that novel was created out of, like, a game. Like, they were just kind of hanging out, and they were like, let's just do something with our time. And they were, I think all of them, at least Percy, Mary, and Lord Byron were writers. I don't know about Claire. But all of them were like writers, and they're like, let's just like write a ghost story for fun and see who could win and like write the best one. And I just find that fascinating. I'm like, they really did have that access, that like luxury of boredom. You could just get to that place of like utter like, what do I do with my time? You just reach that wall and you're like, then you have that desire to create. And that kind of goes back to that point of like, we're all naturally creative, because I think really when you do get to that place of true boredom, you then have that feeling of like that natural innate desire to create something or like do something with your time and your energy. So yeah,
it's so true. And I think I don't want to get too far ahead in the conversation, but I think we don't want to get bored because boredom can be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And in our society, we're so used to, like you said, the luxury of being able to be distracted. And in distraction, you don't have to think for yourself. You don't have to process certain things. And it just can squash your creativity, because then all you're doing all the time is just consuming. There's no room for you to like your creativity to breathe. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's such an incredible like starting point for this, is like, we're going to get to action items later, but boredom is so important for the creative process. Mm-hmm. And that kind of leads into another point that you brought to the table, just the fact that technology is like, it can be such an incredible asset. It can also be such an incredible enemy too. Like, everyone is talking about ChatGPT, AI. My husband is a developer and he uses this and it helps him. Like, it helps him complete projects. And so by no means are we saying like, never use technology. Clearly, we're recording a podcast right now. So, we are building our company online and it's great. But we have to have self-restraint within that. You have to have boundaries within that. You have to learn like, when is enough? Like, when is it time to like shut things down? And when are you actually going to create space to be bored, to have, like, in our industry, we call it white space, getting white space on your calendar, and just having time to like sit, think, ideate, create,
Yeah, like sit with your own thoughts and your own like, because if you sit there long enough in that like weird, uncomfortable place of being bored, you will eventually, like, it's like you just burst at the seams with, like, you have to let it out somehow. You have to let out that creativity. And speaking of boundaries, I was just going to say, I feel like you do a really good job of this, where like you treat technology as like, this is my work. You treat Instagram like, I'm going on here to intentionally have like conversations, like sales conversations in the DMs, or like, you know, whatever it may be, you're going on there with like some sort of purpose. Whereas like a lot of people, like me included, I definitely can get caught up in like scrolling, and like, you know, I use like TikTok, and it is very entertaining, but it is such a waste of time when I think about what I could be doing with my time, when I think about what I could be creating instead of consuming what other people have already created. I was thinking about this, like, when you are on social media a lot, or just the internet, and you're taking in so much information and you're being so like easily entertained, it's like you're seeing all of this, you're taking it in through your eyes into your mind, and it is like polluting your brain. And I would argue to say that it can seep down into your soul too. Like, it really does like affect you, even if you don't realize it. And it really can squash your creativity if you don't have proper boundaries. And like, that's something I know I really want to work on, is like just sitting my phone down and being like, I'm not going to use TikTok right now. I'm going to like sit down and write, or I'm going to sit down and you know, write a song or something, like just use my creativity, because I have it. It's there. But if I am not allowing enough space, then I'm not going to hear that creative voice at all, you know?
So true.
Yeah.
It's so true. And that kind of leads into the work of creativity. We scroll and we consume and we, you know, focus our attention on like these different platforms or other people's brands because it is easy. It is there. It is convenient. It is maybe comfortable. And I'm by no means like perfect when it comes to boundaries, but I do notice like sometimes I will be at the end of my day and I'm like, I feel like total crap right now, but nothing bad happened today. And then I like sit down and I look out, okay, like what just took place? Oh, I just spent way too long, you know, on Instagram. And it's not that anyone shared anything like offensive or, you know, like something really sent me, you know, off the edge of the ledge, but it's just the over consumption, like overstimulation. You just have to have a cutoff. And kind of tying back to the work of creativity, a lot of us don't truly make time to create because it really is work.
Yeah. It takes you like setting that intention first to say like, I'm going to sit down and create. And then you have to follow through on that. If you don't follow through on it, then you have nothing. And I love this book. It's one of my favorite books, and I've read it multiple times now, and I will probably read it so many more times in my life, but it's called A Poetry Handbook by Mary Oliver. If you are a writer or a poet in any way, like I highly recommend it. It's just so beautiful and well written, but she kind of talks about this a little bit, like accessing your creative voice, and she is talking about it in reference to poetry, but I feel like it really is applicable. But I wanted to read a little excerpt from this because it's so brilliantly put. But let me just go ahead and dive into this. So this is in one of the earlier chapters of the book called Getting Ready. And she starts by saying, if Romeo and Juliet had made appointments to meet in the moonlight-swept orchard, in all the peril and sweetness of conspiracy, and then more often than not failed to meet, one or the other lagging or afraid or busy elsewhere, there would have been no romance, no passion, none of the drama for which we remember and celebrate them. And she goes on to say that writing a poem is not so different. She puts it in such poetic language, but it's so great. She says it's a kind of possible love affair between something like the heart and the learned skills of the conscious mind. I love that separation of the two. And, you know, she calls it like the heart here, but I would call it almost like the creative voice. You have two different kind of parts of you, really. I think you have this like creativity that's like, it's not easy to define, but it's like somewhere on the inside of you. But then you also have the conscious mind, that part of your brain that's like, you know, learned some skills and uses those techniques and tools. And she continues on talking about, I'm referencing it as like the creative voice, but she uses such poetic language, so I'm trying to like break it down a little bit. But she says that that creative voice basically learns quickly what sort of courtship it is going to be. Say you promise to be at your desk in the evenings from 7 to 9. It waits, it watches. If you are reliably there, it begins to show itself. Soon it begins to arrive when you do. But if you are only there sometimes and are frequently late or inattentive, it will appear fleetingly or it will not appear at all. Why should it? It can wait. It can stay silent a lifetime.
Oh my gosh, that is so good.
Isn't that crazy? I love the way she puts it because it's like you have to have both the conscious part of your mind and that like subconscious, unconscious kind of part of your mind meet together. You have to make the intention, or like she said, Romeo and Juliet, they made appointments to meet. And if they didn't follow through, if one of them didn't show up, like there would have been none of that romance and passion. And if you make appointments to meet your creative voice, if you make the time to sit down and create, but then you don't really show up, or you're kind of just like, not really there, not fully there, and you're just disconnected and you just don't want to do it. Maybe you don't show up at all. Like you make the promise and you're like, I'm going to show up. I'm going to sit down from, 7 to 9 and do whatever it is that I want to do. But then you don't follow through on that. Then you don't have anything. It's like,
so true.
It's like, you can have all of the belief and faith and good intentions in the world, but if you don't meet that with action and follow through on it, then you have nothing.
That is so good. I feel like it reminds me of when people, ask me, how are you so motivated all the time? And I think, there's a lot of discussion around like motivation and entrepreneurship and feeling and like, well, I just don't feel like doing this, or I don't feel aligned with this. I understand the sentiment, but I am going to not lie to you guys. That stuff is a huge pet peeve of mine. I think there's a huge difference between building something that's in alignment with what you want and expecting yourself to feel aligned at all times while you're putting in the work to build a business. It's the same exact thing with creativity. I think there's this huge misconception that like creatives are just naturally creative, they feel like creating, and it just kind of rises up from within them, and it's this magical, artistic, like woo-woo type of thing. But actually, if you look at the majority of creatives that are well known, like these big names that we're talking about today, they made time to cultivate their craft, to like steward what was within them. You can have someone that is like so naturally gifted, but if they never steward that, you will have someone that outpaces them, fairly quickly just by stewarding their gift.
I literally wanted to talk about that because I was thinking about this the other day. In preparation for this podcast recording, and I was thinking like your natural talents and abilities are great, but they will only take you so far. Because I was thinking about myself, like I'm jumping ahead a little bit because I want to talk about this my songwriting really quickly, because I do that kind of as a hobby. We both really like music, and I feel like we've had some experience with songwriting in the past, but like I have never taken it seriously. I have never really like sat down and learned a lot of the mechanics of music. So I know a lot of the basics of like piano and guitar, especially piano. Like guitar, I barely know how to play anything on the guitar. But I didn't take the time to learn all the ins and outs of like the piano, how things work. So like the other day, this just happened to me. So that's why I was thinking about it. I often get really inspired to write songs. It's like it comes out of nowhere, and it's like few and far between. It's like it could be like a portion of time, like maybe a few weeks within 1 year, that I'm like, I'm so passionate about this, like writing these songs, and I have so many songs I want to write. And then after that starts to fade, I like drop off and I don't continue that habit of writing songs, of playing the piano like consistently. So because I'm not doing it consistently, and because I haven't put in the time to actually learn the skills and the techniques of like playing the piano, for example, whenever I sit down to write, I get so frustrated with myself because I'm like, I want to write like a masterpiece. Like I want to write something that's really unique and cool, but I don't know what I'm doing. So it takes me like 10 times longer to get there. If I were to just be consistent and if I were to actually put in more time, like even just a few days out of the week to like learn more of those skills, then my artistry could shine more. But I just haven't put in the time or the effort, if I'm being honest.
And I think we can all relate to that in some like form or fashion. I feel like I can relate to that when it comes to writing. I mean, writing was my starting point in entrepreneurship. I always tell people that at one point in my childhood, I had 7 journals separately going at one time, all with a different purpose. That's like my type A structured brain that's like trying to like, you know, go with my creativity there. And I started blogging and I started writing for the print publication that I ran for a while. But even then, like I hadn't really honed in on that skill set. And even today, like with The Awakening, I write a ton of content. And I feel like I've grown a lot in that area, but there's so much more of that gift that I could steward. And I actually want you to mention this next book that you have listed here because I think it's a good one.
Yeah. So there's this book called On Writing Well by William Zinsser. And it's basically about writing nonfiction because William Zinsser was a nonfiction writer. He wrote for like the newspapers and stuff in like the 60s. Like he, I think, was a writer for the New York Herald Tribune in the 60s. And so the whole book is like nonfiction writing. But I feel like if you write in any capacity, like if you write copy for your brand, everyone writes emails, you know, you put all this stuff together. Highly recommend this book. I currently have the 5th edition. I got it at a thrift store, so I don't have the like latest one, but it's so good. He talks about, like, he opens the book basically talking about this panel that he was on. He went to a university to speak about writing as a vocation, like as a job. And there was another person on the panel who was a doctor or like a surgeon or something. And he was there to talk about writing as a hobby because like he did it for fun on the side. So you had 2 very different opposing opinions, but I found it so interesting because you had the doctor who, you know, after a long day at work, he would like sit down with his legal pad and just like write. And he was like, it was so fun. And just like the words came out of me and, you know, just very like dreamy and like that kind of like creative personality. Whereas Zinsser, he's just sitting there like so practical and pragmatic about it. But he was like, he was talking specifically about writing, but in a sense, I mean, it can be applied to creativity at large because he was basically saying that like writing isn't always easy or fun. He said that it is lonely, it's hard, and it requires you to actually like sit down and work. He also said, he was talking about writing specifically as a craft, and I love this quote. I just have to read it. He said, "The man who runs from his craft because he lacks inspiration is fooling himself. He is also going broke." Isn't that so good? I was like, dang.
That is a huge mic drop. And if that is not painting a picture of entrepreneurship as well, I don't know what is.
You won't always feel inspired to create. And like with songwriting, for me, I only feel inspired so often. It's like very rare that I feel inspired to write songs. And you're not always going to feel inspired or motivated. You're not always going to feel that. So that's where like discipline comes in. That's where like you have to work for it. Work is not always fun. Discipline is not fun. Like no one likes the word discipline. I mean, when you think about it, you think about like a parent disciplining their child for doing something wrong or something, but like discipline's not fun. So like creativity is not always going to be fun. It's just not. Like you have to be willing to just show up and work for it.
Yeah. And I feel like there's just such a direct tie to entrepreneurship there because so many people start their businesses, some because they see a need or a gap, right? And they create something that fills that gap. But a lot of us, especially in our space, we start because of passion, because of a desire for a different lifestyle, you know? And so we kind of go into it with this, you know, preconceived notion that, oh, well, like this is meant to be fun at all times because this is exciting to me. This is my passion. I'm building this in order to have the life that I want. And although you can have all of those things, the process is not always going to feel good or be fun. And I think that, to your point, that is where discipline has to be cultivated. And discipline is huge when it comes to creativity. I mean, the only way that we create, like the campaigns that we create, for example, I keep using that example because we get asked about that a lot. We set a meeting, it goes on the calendar, probably multiple meetings, and we take time to like hash out ideas. I remember last summer I had an idea for a video that I wanted to create that was like based on a video game, and I shared it with Jordan. I was like, oh, this might be really weird and this sounds kind of dumb coming out of my mouth, but like this could be fun. And she was like, no, that's really cool. Like, let's play with that idea. Like, let's create space to actually like talk about things that may work, may not work, you know? Put it on the calendar, talk about it, ideate, like create the space and time, create the discipline in order to like steward the creativity that's already inside of you. So,
amen.
Yeah.
I was also, just to add to that, I was thinking about, because I feel like you used this example recently and maybe like some copy that you wrote for Instagram. I can't remember where you had put this, but you're talking about like a landscape. And like, you know, when you have this landscape with like mountains, you only have a few peaks, and then the rest of it is like the valley. It's like the floor, you know? So those like high moments of like inspiration and creativity are few and far between. That's where you have to be disciplined in the valley area to like keep trucking on, like keep moving forward, you know? So
absolutely. You can't expect it to be highs all the time. That's more rare. More often than not, you're going to be in the valley, or you're going to be climbing up a mountain or down a mountain.
Yeah.
And so like remain disciplined, put in the work, expect that creating something meaningful is going to take work. It's not just going to happen out of thin air. I think the last thing we wanted to touch on that kind of ties in with that is just the discomfort of creativity. Tapping into a deeper level of creativity is uncomfortable. I think about when I watch artists, when I watch Joni Mitchell, when I think about like Stevie Nicks and Fleetwood Mac. We obviously love, you know, music around here, but I see them on that stage bearing their heart and soul. And that's not even capturing like the actual creation of that music. Being willing to go to a different place that is sometimes maybe hard to face, or requires work. Like it can be really uncomfortable to create something meaningful. I don't think enough people talk about that.
Yeah, like it requires something of you. You have to be willing to go there. Because like we said earlier, it's like we're all like little creatives, like little creators walking around like creating stuff. Like you have that on the inside of you already. Like, let's just be real. You have that deep down somewhere on the inside of you. But to like get to that place, you have to work for it. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. And it's kind of like, you know, I think about like gem mining and, you know, they like chip away at all of this rock to find that like diamond in the rough. Like it takes that work and it takes that process in order to actually get to the gem and get to the good stuff. So you have to be willing to go there. And creativity can also be really vulnerable and scary sometimes. Like depending on what you're doing, depending on maybe what you're creating, it can feel uncomfortable. I was thinking about this like at the start of the year. I was really wanting to write a lot more. And so I wrote a couple pieces that I put onto my Instagram. And in the process of just writing those pieces, it felt so scary because in the back of my mind, I knew my intention was to share it. My intention was to put it out there so that other people could read it. And I was like, I am putting all of myself into this. Like, I'm not sharing everything about myself and my life, but I'm putting that creativity that's like deep inside of you. Like, I'm putting that on a page for people to read, for people to judge or critique. And like, that is so scary. Like putting yourself out there is scary. I was thinking about like creating content sometimes for, you know, the awakening, the brand. I get kind of scared sometimes because I'm like, what will people think of this graphic? Like, is it going to be good enough? You know, it's very, very vulnerable.
And I think too, sometimes it's coming back to like, what is the purpose of the creativity? And it isn't always to please people. Sometimes you create things that aren't even for people. Obviously, in this context, we're talking about creativity as it relates to, entrepreneurship, because that's our community, that's you guys. But, sometimes we create behind the scenes to steward our gifts. And then other times we create because we know we're going to share and we're hoping it's going to serve, but it is a piece of you. And it feels like you're just kind of showing that out in the open, and people can respond and react however they want to. Mm-hmm. But why are you doing it? As long as you're operating from a place of, you are stewarding and honoring the gifts within you, you're putting yourself into that, you're creating something that you're proud of, who cares? Mm-hmm. Like, who cares what anyone thinks? I think that's a larger conversation to be had as well, because you think about visibility in the online space, you're putting your face out there, you're putting your name out there, but creativity is vulnerable. Like when we created this podcast, when we created the campaign to go with it, I loved it. I mean, it's like my family, it's legacy, it's all the things that I love. But I'm like, wow, everybody's going to see this. Is everybody going to receive it well? Is it going to mean anything to them? Is it going to resonate? So it is really vulnerable work. And, some of you might be sitting here thinking like, why go to this place? Like, why is it important for me to create at this like level of depth? And I think you kind of have to come back to like, what are you wanting to build? If you want to go and create something that is a little bit more, kind of with the norm or stereotypical, or you want it to kind of fit into your niche, like that's your prerogative. But I think so many people in our community, they ask the questions like, how can I show my voice? Like, how can I show up in a way that is different and is unique? Because that is going to be meaningful for people that see it. And it's, of course, going to help your business. When you form those like deep emotional connections and bonds with your community, that a lot of times happens through letting your creativity come through in the content that you're creating, in the presence that you are building across every single platform that you're on. And so you kind of have to come back to what is your prerogative? What is your goal? But I think that any person that isn't willing to go to a deeper place to access their own creativity, you're doing yourself a disservice. Mm-hmm. Because that is something you have that no one else on the entire planet has. Sure, like there are other writers, there are other coaches, there are other painters, whatever it is. There is not another you, and you have a unique take and spin on whatever it is that your gift is. And I think that to me, when I think about that, I personally feel a responsibility to share it. I feel like I have one life to live. I have this day, this moment. I have this platform that I'm building right now. And I feel an immense responsibility to steward what I have been given, to honor that, to work on it, cultivate it in order to be of best service, and in order to also live at like my full potential.
Mm-hmm. That is so powerful. I love that. I was just like, I'm just looking at you like, yep. Mm-hmm. Amen.
That was like off the notes, but I had that thought, people might be asking like, why do I really need to go this deep? Like, why can't I just create a basic graphic? You can, but like, what are you wanting to build with your brand?
Yeah. And I think like showing yourself through the things that you create is so powerful, and it leads to really deep connections. And I feel like that's what we're all about. I don't know about other people, but it's like, don't you want depth in your connections and your relationships, whether it's just life relationships or business relationships? Like, wouldn't you want that depth? Like, that's so powerful. And I think that also ties back to being vulnerable. I mean, when you are vulnerable and you show your face on your Instagram story, and maybe you're a little bit nervous to do that, or nervous to put out whatever campaign you're running, like, don't run away when that feels uncomfortable, because vulnerability just leads to more depth. And vulnerability, like showing yourself, people will resonate with that. People see your face and they will love it. Like, don't worry about other people and what they think. Do your thing, like show up as you. That's the best thing you can do for you and your brand.
Yeah. And as you do that, you'll get better at it. You'll get more confident. I mean, oh, honey, if we find like my first Instagram live somewhere, or if we find like old graphics that we created before we even had our branding done, we are like, honey, that is not the vibe. That's not what we're going for here at all. But like, you have to honor where you're at. Don't let perfectionism come in, because you can always get better. So if you wait to get better, you're going to be waiting forever. So start where you're at, and your skill set will grow, your confidence will grow, but just know, like, this is like the day and the moment that you have right now. So like, how can you honor that? How can you show up right now with what you have? And your confidence will grow. So we want to shift gears and give you a few recommendations for things that you can prioritize in order to access a deeper level of creativity, and to really cultivate the skill sets that you've personally been given. Why don't you kick it off?
Number one, I mean, we started the episode really talking about this, but I'm circling back. Number one recommendation would be to shut off the noise and allow space to get bored. That can be, turning off your phone, putting on do not disturb, turning off of your streaming services, whatever you go to for entertainment or for, filling that time or that void. Shut those things off and separate yourself from them for just a little bit. Set aside like actual time to shut off the noise and allow yourself to get to that place of boredom, because from there you will be able to hear and access your creative voice a little bit easier if you're not taking in all of that noise all the time.
Yeah. And like, if you're someone like me that's very type A and you like structure, I even think for the people that don't, you might need this more. Like, be strategic with this. Put white space on your calendar. I can't remember who this is, but it's like a big name entrepreneur. I mean, probably million billionaire. I remember he shared that every day of the week, Monday to Friday, he has at least 30 minutes to an hour blocked off on his calendar. He takes no meetings. He has no agenda. It is white space for him to simply think, to ideate, and to be. And I think that that is so incredible. Now, you don't have to go to that extreme, but like, be strategic with this. Maybe it's once a week. Maybe it's more boundaries in the evening, but like, you have to have boundaries to shut off the noise. I think like that's first and foremost.
And I feel like that really ties into the second recommendation. Like, make the time to create. Set it aside in your calendar. Actually set it up on your calendar so that you get a reminder or something. Make the time to create, but don't just put it on your calendar. You actually have to follow through on the promise that you make. So set aside the time. It doesn't have to be hours. It can be like 30 minutes. 30 minutes, like, I think anyone could sacrifice 30 minutes. We all have the same amount of time in the day. We all have 24 hours. Like, what are you going to do with it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't want to say no excuses, because like, I understand sometimes things are there, but also no excuses, It's like, make time, be intentional, and show up. Show up to put in the work. And then the final piece here that we both agreed on, we wanted to mention, was creating in a different medium. I think this is really powerful, because even for me, like, sometimes I love hanging out with you guys and I love creating captions. I love it. But sometimes I get so tired of creating in that same exact way. Like, when we put on our legacy campaign and we got to like bring family history in and, just like do some different things, I came alive. Like, it was so much fun. But I'm even speaking in the form of like, if you are an online creator, like, go paint something, like go to a pottery class with your friends, or, sit down and write, or freaking dance. I don't care. But I think creating in a different medium, it removes the pressure. It removes the fact that a lot of us are creating for our jobs. And it allows you to just kind of embrace that creative spirit more, because there's less pressure.
Yeah. It's like, if you don't have any real hobbies right now, or maybe you feel like you don't have the time for it, like, make the time throughout your week to like prioritize creating in a different way. Because I feel like that allows your creative like muscle to be loose and to be like used in some different ways so that when you come back to your work, like your job, you're able to approach it with a stronger like creative muscle, you know?
There's a reason why we get creative ideas in the shower. There's a reason why after you take a vacation, or like for me, I'll be on like my third day of vacation and I'm like, I have a billion ideas. And it's because you've done the thing that sounds like it's not productive. You've taken a step away and you've literally paused everything. You've removed the pressure and you've allowed yourself to just like live and be and breathe. Creativity needs that just as much as it needs the other side of structure and discipline and showing up to your desk.
Amen. Amen. That was a good point. That was excellent.
Man, this was so good, and I feel like we could keep going, but we don't want to keep you guys too long. If you guys aren't connected with Jordan, can you tell everyone your Instagram handle?
My Instagram is just my full name, Jordan Alexa Long. Jordan with an A, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jordan. And I know that you haven't been sharing as much recently, but I think that you are going to be sharing more when it comes to writing and creativity. And if you like any of those topics, if you like fairies, if you like, old music, like please go follow Jordan. And thank you so much for hanging out with us. I feel like this is going to be the first of many episodes that we do with Jordan because she's just incredible. If you would not mind, we would so appreciate it if you would leave a review, share this over to your Instagram. We are at My Awakening Co on all platforms. And until next time, we hope you guys have an amazing day. Bye.
Bye.